Well, how I would say I was shaped to be a sex worker from the beginning was like one, not being emotionally nurtured. So it's like I'm already learning how to be on my own to an extent. And that's kind of something that you have to be detached from in the club setting, it's atmosphere, all of it. But as well as like every morning before school, I was watching MTV music videos of like half naked women dancing. Like, I was obsessed with the Pussycat Dolls. I was obsessed with Beyonce, Shakira, like anyone that just looked really sexy on camera. Like, I was just always, dancing and trying to mimic their moves. I wanted to be like that. I always was so inspired. And also just the fact of like, I don't know, just not having parental figures there every day. Like, I was a very independent child. I was off on my own doing things all the time. And when you're raised to be hyper independent and you get pushed out of the nest very early, you have to figure out how to provide for yourself. Like, I didn't have backups. Even though my parents, were a good middle class family, like they were making money, they didn't have anything set aside for me, and they weren't supporting me by the time I was like 17, 18. It was basically like you're getting thrown to the wolves and you're going to figure it out. And for a little while, I was doing that in ways that weren't making me a lot of money. Like, I wasn't making more than what I needed to pay bills. And so at that point, being a young woman who's already been sexualized for most of her life, since, I was a child, I'm so used to that already. It already pushes me into sex work because I'm used to it. And it's like, oh, I'm being sexualized. That's not a big deal. I can make money for it. Oh, that's easy. I can figure it out. It wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, but I was already like mentally set up for that from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with like the whole early 2000s being this like really weird time in human history where hypersexualization became very prevalent, and especially in our like culture, like when we were kids, that was very prominent where there was like Playboy bunny culture,
Mm-hmm.
that like specifically like that's a core memory that I have is like watching like the girls next door because I had
Yeah.
very like neglectful, like you how you were describing, like I was put in this independent state very early on in my life, and I think most strippers specifically like were people who saw levels of opulence, whether they saw it on a screen or they had a dose of it at some point in their life, whether their parents had money and lost it or grew up poor and like desired to have that certain level of opulence, just never could like necessarily reach it. It's going to push you to want to give up morality per se, like get away from the Christian upbringing and specifically the Southern upbringing that we had, because at that point you've had morals and you're supposed to just trust that you're going to get everything you need, but you didn't get that from your family, you didn't get that from your parents, you didn't get that from society. So as a female, as a woman, as a sexualized being, you're going to have that natural calling. And like in just like my personal life, like I feel like that was something that I always wanted to do. Like it could be even as complicated as a trauma response. Like I think I had a lot of like sexual trauma happen to me at a very very early
Yeah.
developmental
You and
age,
I both.
and I give credit to that. Like I won't lie to people and be like, I don't know what made me want to be a sex worker. I don't know what made me want to be a stripper, because I know, like to some degree, and I think a lot of
Mm,
people like to toy with psychology about that or play like Sigmund Freud style, like
they
what's wrong
do.
with you or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it's like, I know what's wrong with me, but um that I don't see myself as a victim. I see it as like a rite of passage of like, okay, well, I've turned this experience into an opportunity for me to not only capitalize my sexuality but to embrace it and step into like my personal power by, instead of like being a victim of sexualization, like you're encapsulating it and using it as a tool to further yourself, to further your livelihood, your income. Like it's a very important stepping stone
You
that I think a lot of
alchemized
people
it.
have fear from. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people like have stigmatization and critique sex workers. Like that's why so many people hate strippers. Or like there's like almost like a stereotype of like wives or girlfriends hating strippers. It's like, ugh, like you went to the strip club last night and these strippers danced on you. Like, oh, I bet they were like really enjoying themselves. And it's like the only part of that I enjoyed was taking your man's money because it's just the nature, it's the belly of the beast. It's like the nature of the matrix, you know? So it's
Mhm.
like a sacred act, like to be called into sex work, you know, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think thinking about it now after, what you said, I was thinking about how everything was very polarized in my household. So like one parent was super
Oh yeah.
Christian and the other one was super atheist. So like I would go to church with my mom and I would come home and my dad would make me watch like antichrist videos and things that went against religion. So I was always in a
It's
space of
weird.
like
The
it's
Antichrist.
very weird. I was constantly in a space of seeing things from
Mm-hmm.
both lenses. And so when I was younger, I would have never thought that I would become a sex worker at all. Like, that was never in my view. But something I had always done when I was younger was try to get affection from men by using my sex appeal because that's, how I was taught to do so. Like, oh, you want someone to give you attention, you want love from a man, then you use your body to do that. And I had been practicing that since I was at least, consciously since I was like 14. So
Mm-hmm.
I already had that under wraps, throughout high school. I knew how to get a boy's attention. And I was already setting myself up for that. Like, it would be so easy to make money off of it. I'm already so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like back to the polarization thing, it's like, oh, I couldn't when I thought of going into sex work, I didn't have this polarizing view of it. Like, ew, this is so bad. I can never touch that. Like, to me, nothing was good or bad. It was like, this is that and that is this. Here's this 9 to 5 life that I could stay at, or I could go and try sex work that everybody might think is horrible, like you said. But
Mm-hmm.
to me, it wasn't because everything in my life had always been on one side or the other.
Yeah, I think there's like a stereotype that strippers have daddy issues, but it's actually the exact opposite. I think every stripper I've ever interacted with or gotten close to has told me that they have mother issues, like mommy
I have
issues.
both, but yes, it's
If that make
definitely.
it's kind of a weird dichotomy because like my mom was like the neglectful abusive parent and my dad was like the rewarding loving like parent that spoiled me all the time. So right then from the beginning of my existence, like men provide, they give, and then I guess like trying to trust that relationship with women was not as solid. So that was ingrained into my body early on, and thus is born the nature of sex work.
That's another thing I want to touch on with that is like a lot of the ways I had mentioned that I didn't get a lot of, emotional fulfillment from my parents. So the way in which that I would be rewarded for things or like shown love was through materials. So I was also getting used to that, from men or just anyone essentially that if I did something correct, I did my work, then I was getting materials in return.
Yeah, that's just like that's kind of like American capitalist individualism. It's like
It
kind of a
is.
culture.
Yeah, it really is
It's the
in the
culture. So
culture,
how can you
but
blame somebody for being deep within their culture? You know, that's just like the nature of it.
yeah, it's like, oh, you were good and you'll get this material thing in return. I even had my mom had to like pay me to make good grades at one point because I was
A
about
lot of
to like
parents do.
I was so like sad girl. I was about to flunk out of high school. So my mom was like,
Yeah.
please just make a C and I'll give you
Yeah,
$50. And I
well,
was
see,
like, okay, I guess I have motivation
that's where my
now.
parents went wrong, and then I ended up being a stripper. So
Yeah, that's that.